In this video, we're going to take a look at question 2b from the 2016 AP Computer Science exam, the free response component. And we're going to write this function called contains word, which is the log message. If you haven't read the question, please take a second and do that. But essentially what this question is doing is you're writing a Boolean method that is going to check to see if a keyword is contained inside the description. But it has to follow the rule that the keyword has to be on its own. So if, for example, our keyword is disk, these four cases will return true because disk is by itself, disk is by itself, disk is by itself, and disk is by itself. So it can't be a situation where disk is part of a word. So here are some situations that return false. This is case sensitive, so if the keyword is small case disk, that's going to return false. The problem here is that yes, there's a space in front of disk, but disk is not by itself because they have that 3 at the end of it. Here, disk is at the end, so that's okay, but we see it's preceded by a slash. And here, this is going to return false because disk is part of a larger word. So these 3 rules are what essentially are telling you what you need to do for this question. So here's an example implementation. Again, you can find copies of my code at miscu.com. I'm in the process of developing that, so please bear with me. And if you have any questions or suggestions, please don't hesitate to pass those along. One way to approach this is to write, to account for the multiple situations you might run into. And the way you're going to set up these if statements is in a cascading fashion, because if one of the conditions evaluates to false, it means I don't have to worry about that in my later set, and that allows us to avoid index out of bounds errors. Now, before going on, I will say you can do this question with one line of code, and I'll explain that when I'm done. So the first thing we're going to do is the first check is essentially is the description the keyword? Because if the description contains only the keyword, we're going to return true. The second check we're going to check is we're going to see if the length of the description is less than or equal to the keyword dot length. And if that's the case, we're going to return false. So that's a situation where maybe the description is di and the keyword is disk. Well, we know that disk isn't contained in that description because it's smaller than the length of the word that we're looking for. Now, some of you might pause and say, well, wait a second, you're saying less than or equal to. What happens if they match? Remember, I've already accounted for that situation here. We're never going to evaluate a situation where description and keyword are the same in this case. And the reason why I have to check if it's less than or equal to the length of keyword is because these checks 3 and 4. Because what check 3 does is check 3 inspects for the situation where the keyword is the very first string, is at the very start of the description, and then it has a space after it. So what I do is I pull out from description the substring from the 0th index to the keyword length plus 1, because that's going to get basically the keyword and then the space at the end. And I'm going to check if that's equal to the keyword plus the space. And if that's the case, I return true. Again, this would generate an index out of bounds error if the description and keyword had the same length because of this plus 1 here. And that's why I have to actually check. I have to return false here if description.length is less than or equal to keyword. Now I do the same thing, but I'm going to check the end of the description. So I'm going to pull out the substring in the same way. And there it is. It's a little longer. Description.substring, we're going to go to the length of description minus the keyword length plus 1, because we're going to go back to it. We have to account for that space that might precede the description, the keyword, and we're going to check if that's equal to the space plus the keyword. And then finally, if the description, so we've checked the front, we've checked the end, and now we're just going to check if it contains the keyword with a space in front and after. And if all of these things fail, we just return false. And that's one way to approach this problem. It's breaking it up into a bunch of if statements that work because they're only going to make it past certain points. This works because the earlier conditions account for the possible index out of bounds errors later. Now, you could do it that way, or you could do it in one line of code like this. You could just add a space to the front end of the description like this, and then use this function called .contains, which will return a true if the past value is contained within the implied object. This actually leverages a really nice idea of adding the space at the front and the end, modifying that string to make it so you only have to check one situation as opposed to checking a number of things. So you can do this using the contains function, or you can do this using the index of. Index of being on the AP subset exams. I don't believe contains is. And what index does, index will return the first instance of where this string is contained within that string. Sorry, the index of this string within this string. And if it's greater than or equal to 0, we know it's within there, so that would be true. I hope this video helped, and as always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Have a great day.